Let's move on to, we talked IKEA, but we have to talk about the biggest star in all of Sweden. You did a video about PewDiePie.
I did, yes.
In defense of his racist,
Nazi,
bigoted anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And you, a Swedish Jew, defended him.
I did, and I was probably the only Swede and or Jew who did.
I fully defended him.
Yeah.
Absolutely fully
No, I just think it was ridiculous because there are real Nazis out there, and whenever they use the word anti-Semite of someone who isn't an anti-Semite, they really devalue the word, so I can't use it against real anti-Semites, which annoys me.
Yeah, so let's pause for a second. Can you just set up what PewDiePie did for?
So PewDiePie went on to some page where you can pay anyone $5 to pretty much do anything, and he started trying this service out. And he found some maybe Indian guys, maybe, you don't know, and they would dance and hold up a sign which could read whatever you wanted to read. And so he wanted it to read "Death to all Jews." And they did. And they got fired, and he got, well, pressured and lost a lot of his sponsorship deals, I suppose, and accused of anti-Semitism. Yeah. But my feeling is that his generation, for them, Hitler and the Holocaust is basically like Satan was 100 years ago. It was the embodiment of evil. So he just wanted to see if they would actually perform an evil service for the mere sum of $5. And they did, and he was horrified. His reaction was horrified, and I think that says it all. So he was trying to show his followers that it wasn't a good thing, but kind of funny, because it is kind of funny. Yeah. It's not super advanced comedy. It's not the comedy of subtleties, but there is some sort of falling on your ass in there. Yeah. And I thought it was a bit harsh to label him an anti-Semite just for basically doing consumer research.
Well, that was the interesting thing to me. It's like, this guy has no history of anti-Semitism. As far as I can tell from anything I've seen of him, he has no history of bigotry or prejudice or racism or anything. He now does something that's just a joke. Now, you could argue back and forth all day. We get every comic in here of all time and go whether it was stupid or whether there's some anti-whatever or just a bad joke or any of that or in poor taste. But all of that, one incident, especially related around a joke, doesn't mean you're a bigot. No. But the rush to judgment I actually found more interesting than the specific thing itself.
This is not like when Kramer lost his temper on stage. No. This is, you know, we might argue if it's good comedy or not. I personally don't really get the younger generation's YouTube comedy with all their editing and jump cuts. But I do understand.
We're doing this in one cut. You're right with that? I mean,
yes, I am.
We got cameras here, but we're not jumping.
No, I'm fine with that, and I think it's a quite nice setup. But I also think that when you look at the editing of the younger generation, even in the editing, there's a language taking shape with punchlines and pauses and everything. So if you don't, I'm not probably ever going to be able to get it completely, but if you grow up with it, there's comedy in there.
Yeah. What was the reaction from the media in Sweden?
Nothing.
Because oh, really? Because here it was bananas. I mean, Wall Street Journal wrote ridiculous articles. What do you make of that?
Usual, passive-aggressive, doesn't suit their meta story, so they just don't bother. Yeah. It's like whenever I break a taboo, silence is the most common answer.
Yeah. Does the media talk about him at all? Because it's kind of funny.
They used to celebrate him.
Really?
Yes. One of our most successful Swedes in the last few years, right? But now, silence.
So you think that even that then, because he's had a little bit of a political evolution, I think himself, or that he's gotten a little edgier or talking about stuff, that's just going to push him out?
Yes. And at least of the public consciousness in Sweden and the mainstream media. But I mean, online, he's as big as ever. It's not going to change.
Yeah, well, that was the irony. The guy's got something like 55 million YouTube subscribers. Wall Street Journal would kill for 1% of that.
Yes.
So it's only a benefit for them to attack him because it's going to get clicks.
Absolutely. And behind the paywall as well. Quite cynical, if you ask me.
So how do you think we push back against some of this? Because this is what you do, right? As a comic, this is what you do. You're here talking about this stuff. We see that the media is just eating everybody that comes out and starts coming against this stuff. What do you do?
Well, I speak up because that's all I can do. I wouldn't handle responsibility as an elected official well, I think. From my experience, power tends to corrupt, and me faster than most people.
Yeah.
But I speak up, and I hope that some people who have skill and maybe a sense of responsibility and intelligence will go into politics, or affect change in some other way in private corporations, whatever. Just responsible people take that responsibility now.
Yeah.
It's time.
Do you find that when we have a conversation like this and we're talking about what socialism is doing, what leftism is doing, all that people then suddenly don't think you're a liberal, because I sense that you're actually a liberal. We can go through all your politics if you want. If you want to lay out a couple things that you believe in, we can talk about abortion or death penalty or whatever. If you want to just fire off a couple, you're obviously pro-marijuana. I suspect you're pro-gay marriage.
Absolutely. Pro almost any type of, well, I'm pro-gays.
Yeah,
marriage, I'm not so sure of.
Fair enough. I can respect that.
And abortion, well, that is a tough question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm from Sweden, so abortion is nothing to us. It's a non-question. It is not a taboo in any way, shape, or form. And as a libertarian, I would say I would have to go for the full autonomy in principle argument. That is, a woman has the right to abort a fetus up until 9 months.
Yeah.
But then again, because as long as I don't see proof of a soul, I can't expect humans to have a soul. Which would be a religious argument for preserving human life. But in practice, I think I would refer to science.
Yeah.
So if they say we can save someone from this amount of weeks, then okay, then that's the limit.
Right.
What else is there?
Death penalty?
Well, I'm against death penalty, mainly because of hypocrisy. I don't think a government can tell its citizen to not kill people and then kill people themselves. So it has to be life in prison or something as an alternative to that.
What do you think would be like a fair tax system? You guys are taxed very high, and we've already discussed why there's some inherent problems with that, and some reasons that it's been good over time.
Well, the entire system in Sweden is built around you having an employment, a steady employment. If you have that, then you're in. It's perfect, it's fine. You'll make a decent amount of money, you'll have 5 weeks paid vacation, you'll have medical, everything. But in the recent years, and I don't think it has to do with immigration, I just think that a socialist system eventually always eats itself, as you said. So the level of material wealth has gone down dramatically in the last 30 years, and immigration plays a part as well.
Yeah.
But I'm a one-man company, right, as a comedian. So I pay a marginal tax of 75%, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, so really explain what that means. That sounds insane.
Well, what that means is I'm supposed to pay like maybe 55%, and then I have 100 kroners left, and I go into a store and I buy coffee, and then there's 28% VAT, value-added tax, and there's some other tax, and in the end it's between 70 and 75%. Which makes it almost impossible to live. And if you're like me, or you're approaching 40, but you don't have children, so you don't really need all the daycare systems, and you're not old, and you're not using hospitals very much, then you're just paying a shitload of money for nothing, basically, because we don't have an army. We used to have a lot of sick beds hospital beds per capita in the hospitals. Now I think we have the fewest in the OECD.
Really?
Yeah. So
is that because the services got cut back, or are there more?
I think money is going somewhere else. I'm not entirely sure where.
Right.
Maybe gender studies. And we have no army because the United States have been paying for our defense for the last 60 years. So I think there are certain things that we need to deal with as a society that I don't really see anyone bringing to the table in any discussion or debate.
Yeah. So, all right. So now that you've laid out some basic liberal stuff there.
Yes. But also,
go ahead.
But also, I should say that the political scale here and in Sweden is skewed. Here, if someone yells at you liberal, they're usually a Republican or conservative, right?
Right.
But in Sweden, if someone yells at me, they're a socialist, and they're like, "You're a liberal," and that's a bad word for them.
Right. Well, it's a bit when the conservatives say liberal, they mean it as a bad word too. I've been trying to save the word. I don't know if...
Yeah, I know, but that's also fascinating with the political scale, because here it goes from left to right, and libertarian would be almost as far right as you can come.
Yeah.
But I see myself in Europe as in the middle of the left-right scale, but very high up on freedom.
Yeah.
And our political scale is more like a square divided up into quadrants. So you have, well, you're opposite me, so left, right, and then freedom, authoritarian. So I'm in the middle up here, really.
Well, that's why I've been trying to explain to people that there's so many commonalities between real liberalism, classical liberalism, and libertarianism. Because if we can get these people to come together on the basis of rights, of individuality and rights, there's a real movement there.
Enlightenment ideals,
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And it may take many generations for it to take root in a place like Sweden.
Yes, because we never really had it.
Yeah.
We just had the idea of it, and we call ourselves a democracy. And as long as it was an extremely homogeneous population, I don't think the Swedes really noticed that they voted for the same party year after year after year.
Yeah.
But after 30 years of very large immigration, differences come to light, and by now I think they're very confused.
Yeah. So where in 20 years, as the immigrant population grows, we know that they generally reproduce more, they're taking more from the state than they're giving. Partially it's not even their fault, as we've already discussed. You have the older society getting older, or the original society getting older. These things, they're just going to keep
getting worse, yes. Unless, of course, Russia invades us.
Yeah, and then everything would be all right?
Nah, then it would be even worse. But, you know, at least we couldn't blame the failure of the socialist system anymore.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So you do have a sort of fatalistic view of this, because as you said earlier, when you go, you want to be able to say, well, I told you so.
Yes.
And it's sort of like, you don't see a correction for this. That's sort of on the horizon.
I see a small correction, but I think, as I said, it's too little too late. And, I mean, we teach our school children about all political ideologies, but of course there's a lot of Marx and Foucault in there, and there's no Mill whatsoever. Yeah. So how will they be able to understand what liberty means? They don't. Swedes don't understand that.
Yeah.
I usually say that if Americans' national myth is freedom, Swedes are safety. And Swedes will sacrifice almost everything for safety. And you know the old libertarian adage, even though it might be misquoted or quoted out of context, that if you sacrifice one for the other, you will end up with neither. So,
yeah.
Yes.
Where do you think Trump falls into the mix? What do the people of Sweden think of Trump? Or sort of even the state of America under
Swedes
Trump?
will think of Trump whatever HuffPost writes of Trump. But I think that Trump is a very interesting trickster character, and I think that because I don't see him as a Republican at all, nor do I see him as a liberal. I see him as pretty much a narcissistic guy who's a bit erratic, and this could go either way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's basically what I've been saying here. He's certainly not a traditional Republican. He's not a conservative. It's a different thing altogether. And I think right before we started the cameras, I said to you, it feels like the chessboard's just been thrown up. The pieces are everywhere now. We don't know which way it's going to go. For me, though, it's hard for me to just gauge. Everyone's so outraged constantly. I just don't want to keep adding to the insane outrage.
Well, I think that is unavoidable, because if you voice your opinions, then a lot of leftists, at least in this place and time, will be upset with you.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to come out of their insular little bubble. But I think that, because Swedish papers, they say that he has the lowest approval rating of any American president, and that is a pure lie. I went into Pew Research, and he actually has an almost phenomenally high approval rating within the Republican voting, the Republican voters. Mm-hmm. So it's exceptionally high. And the way I see it from the outside, the people who voted for Trump, they are tired of your parliament or Senate and Congress being locked in this unending, really status quo, and they just wanted to throw a brick through the window to see what happens. And I think by now we know what happens. It doesn't change the internal politics of the United States very much, but it does have a slight effect on the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. So do you think that, well, I guess, although you said it's whatever Huffington Post says, but do you think the average person in Sweden, do you think they're looking at the United States going, it may be irreparably different than it was before, whatever the nature of our relationship. You know, when Trump says we're going to charge Japan for protecting them and whatever we're going to do with NATO and all that stuff, does that make people in Sweden go, uh-oh?
Yeah, well, to a certain extent, I think it does, and most people don't know that we have paid back to America, and Snowden let us know that we have paid the NSA with a lot of information. So basically, our NSA is a local office of your NSA in Scandinavia. So. Yeah, it freaks them out, and I think by now every politician in Europe knows that they have to contribute more to Western Europe's defense.
Yeah. So on the broader free speech part of this, you're here in America right now. You mentioned your cousin's an American comedian. You're going to do stand-up tonight tomorrow night at the Comedy Store. When you see the pieces of free speech that we seem to be losing right now, and that we're kind of doing it to ourselves. It's not our government doing it to us, at least now. It could be in the future, but I don't really see it as the government doing it. I see it as us doing it to ourselves. I see it as college kids silencing people, and now administrations and all that. It must be incredibly depressing as an outsider to see that.
It is, because you were, when it came to free speech, a beacon. And I come from a country where we don't really have free speech. We have it on paper, sort of, but you can't insult people, so it's not really free speech.
Yeah.
And if you try to use your free speech in Sweden, you'll be ostracized if you voice an opinion that is different from the mainstream opinion. So Swedes don't really understand the concept, as I said, of liberty, so how can they understand free speech?
So what would happen? So if you were to really insult somebody, okay, so we've had the ostracization, that's just what we're doing, well, that's what society's doing to you. But where's the legal line there?
I think in theory I could be sued by the aggrieved party.
Yeah.
But in practice that rarely happens because, as I said, Swedes are very afraid of conflict.
Right.
So they will just give you the silent treatment.
So they'll be offended, but they're not offended enough to actually publicly make an issue out of it.
No.
In a weird way, there's probably some decency in that shame, as opposed to us, where we get into legal battles over it.
Maybe.
Or
you could view it like this, that the social mechanism of shame is actually more powerful than the legal system of shaming people. Because going to prison or being ordered to pay a fine, I mean, that's a sort of way for society to make you feel shame of what you've done, like punish you.
Yeah.
But if society is already taking care of that by giving you the silent treatment and not inviting you to parties, then yes, you already have an excellent system in place.
Have you been able to get a couple other, like, if there are some Swedish comedians out there, are they, I mean, I would imagine that's probably the only place where this is happening. If it's not really happening at the political level, you mentioned the Democratic Socialists, but like, is there something happening comedy-wise that's getting people to talk about this?
Well, I am. But apart from that, not really. I think if you ask a Swede where they stand politically, they will, like a knee-jerk reaction, say leftist. Mm-hmm. Even though most comedians really are libertarians. Mm-hmm. If they, I mean, because, you know, they enjoy freedom, they obviously can handle the chaos, and so on and so on. But they're just raised into it, because when the Social Democratic Party really got their grip on power, they exterminated the Swedish state church. So they basically killed God and replaced him with the Social Democratic Party. And that's why, for most Swedes, social democracy is more of a religion than an actual political philosophy.
So I feel that the way to, although I think I got your answer, or it's been a through line through all this, but I feel like the final question I should be asking you is, if we had to look at Sweden, if you had a crystal ball and you're looking 20 years from now.
Yes.
It's not your deathbed yet, hopefully.
Hopefully not.
But it's 20 years from now and you're looking at as to what's happened to Sweden. Where do you think we're at in 20 years?
Well, I'm hoping for a liberalization of Sweden, but I'm not very convinced it will happen. Hopefully, if nothing else, marijuana will be legal.
So that's the one hope, to at least deal with all this other nonsense.
Yeah, it's some consolation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so hopefully marijuana is legal, but beyond that, I mean, really, I sense you're sort of an optimist in an odd way, but not hopeful that...
I think the system is going to crack itself anyway, sooner or later. The immigration issue is just basically hurrying it along. So they're going to have to adapt. I mean, the big liberalizations of our healthcare markets and school market, or schools, that have happened didn't happen because, oh, this is a good idea, we should do this. It happened because we had to, because our system wasn't working. It was costing too much. We couldn't afford it.
Do you think Europe's even paying attention enough to this? Like, wouldn't you want to go there and just start shaking people and go, guys?
That's pretty much what I'm trying to do, but verbally.
Yeah.
Because I don't really like physical contact that much.
Yeah, well, it would be a tremendous amount of work to go there and physically grab everybody. But do you think they're looking at this as a marker? Do you think that that's starting to take root?
I hope so, yeah. To a certain extent, I can feel the winds changing or something. But to what, I don't know. And as I said, America has liberty in its foundation. There's a cultural understanding of what it means to take personal responsibility here. There's no such thing in Sweden. So Sweden I have very little hope for. But when it comes to the rest of Western Europe, maybe a tad bit more hope, most for England.
Yeah. All right, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to wrap up now. I am going to do your podcast, but I'm thinking that maybe we should take a drive at some point. You're here for a little bit, and we could do it like in the world's largest IKEA. Would that be...
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? We'll just find a nice chaise lounge and a little side thing. And there's so many people there, nobody will know what's going on.
Yes.
Or we could do it in like, aisle 62, bin 8, and just see what's there.
Why not?
Yeah.
Well, I like the Billy Bokhylla, which is...
What's that?
Bookshelves.
Oh, that's the bookshelf?
Yeah.
Where are all these words? They always sound like, oddly sexual things that Rose would have said from St. Olaf in The Golden Girls.
All right. Most of them are just names.
They're just names?
Yeah, common names like Greta or Tosta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I want to go to...
You're more than welcome.
If I come to Sweden, you'll take me to an IKEA? Although, can I go?
I will take you to every... No, not every IKEA. That would be silly. But I'll take you to an IKEA.
You would take an alt-right maniac that's been listed by the @Sweden?
I absolutely would.
Yeah.
I can't afford to say no to new friends.
Fair enough. All right, well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And for more on Aron, although he doesn't like being called a YouTuber, he is on the YouTube. Check him out, youtube.com/the Aron Flam.